Hello viewers, and a warm welcome to the show this evening. My name is Chef Andy, and of course before I proceed, very important that I reintroduce Megan once more. Some of you may have of course seen her on the show before, but I will of course allow her to say hello before we proceed.
Hi viewers, my name is Megan Muthoni. I'm a food lover, I love to cook, and I'm here with Chef Andy so that I can add more into the skill of what I already know in terms of preparing foods.
Awesome. Now, of course, very importantly, before we proceed to name the ingredients that we'll be working with for this dish, I will of course mention we are going to be making a very simple potato salad. And for this recipe, you'll require about half a lemon. You'll also require about 3 tablespoons of mayonnaise, about 2 tablespoons of some chopped chives, and a few sprigs of fresh mint. You'll also require 1 whole green apple, about 1 medium-sized white onion chopped finely. You'll also require a few stems of spring onion. You'll also require some bread, be it a seasoned bun or sesame bun, doesn't really matter. You'll also require some fresh coriander and about half a head of lettuce. You'll also require about 3 potatoes that have been washed and peeled, some peppercorns to crush, and last but not least, some salt to season with. Very importantly, before we begin, we will of course give you this chance to sit back, relax and unwind, and we'll catch you after a short break. Proceed to chop up some of my green apple. So this you can of course alternatively proceed to peel, but I very much like a bit of skin from the apple in there. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Megan, we're ready to cook now?
Yes, I'm excited.
Perfect.
Yes.
Now, of course, before we begin, very important that I mentioned you haven't missed much if you've just tuned in. We've just pretty much introduced the ingredients that we'll be working with. I also have a pot of some water already on the boil. So to start off the process, it's very simple. You begin by draining the water from your potatoes, and we are going to proceed to add those into the water.
Okay, now I want to ask, when it comes to like potatoes, boiling potatoes and everything, there are many types of potatoes that are out there. So I want to know which one gives you that nice, kind of like when you boil it, it's still whole, it doesn't break, it doesn't even absorb any water in it, and it doesn't taste like it doesn't have that tasteless. When you salt it, it has that rich, nice potato taste.
Well,
and gives you that powder kind of when you slice it. Yes.
Now, the trick is very simple. So we are going to add a bit of salt to our water.
Okay.
So one technique I normally use on most occasions is I peel my potatoes in advance.
All right.
Wash them and then I let them sit in some water.
Okay.
Now, basically, the reason for doing so is to remove this. There's a particular whitish liquid that comes off potatoes once you peel them.
Oh, okay.
Now, what happens is this particular liquid is pretty much what will, on many occasions, be the reason why fries taste commercial and plastic as opposed to them tasting very much like potatoes.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is if you can be able to peel and wash your potatoes in advance and leave them in a bit of water, what happens is the potato now will pretty much absorb as much water as it can, and by the time you boil it, it's not as it was before. It's a little more pungent, so it's more like a sponge.
All right.
So it's actually absorbed a bit of water. Same effect that happens when you soak your beans overnight before boiling them the day after.
All right.
Basically, allowing them to soak up enough water allows for them to cook much faster, being that they're more pungent, they're more porous, and they've actually absorbed enough water.
Okay.
Now, another trick as well to make sure that your potatoes are not also dry and ashy is by selecting the best potatoes every single time.
Okay.
Now, one thing I can also share with viewers is a lot of us are very happy to buy pre-washed vegetables.
All right.
Now, on many occasions, I prefer to pick my potatoes as raw, in their rawest form. So even if they have a bit of sand in them, or if they've actually been picked much closer to the time I receive them, the better.
Okay.
So what happens is that reaction that you mentioned, that observation you had, this normally occurs with potatoes that have overstayed.
Oh.
So potatoes that are probably sat, maybe you probably bought them on a Monday, you want to cook them the Monday after. By that time, the potato will actually have lost its juices. And by the time you cook it, since it doesn't have any juices to retain its consistency, it's basically going to dry out as soon as you drain it. But a fresher potato will not give you the same effect.
So how do you tell a fresh potato and one that is overstayed so that you avoid like picking them once you go to the market or wherever you're buying them? How can you tell this potato is fresh and this has overstayed?
So what 2 pointers I can share with you is try and avoid potatoes that have already been washed.
Okay.
Preferably buy them in the most organic market you can be able to find them.
Okay.
Because for one thing, occasionally you will find that ingredients of vegetables bought in supermarkets have probably sat in storage and they've probably lost the beautiful juices that keep them fresh.
Okay.
What I would recommend, even for those of you at home, try and buy your potatoes organically. Avoid buying your potatoes from supermarkets, and also avoid any potatoes that have already been washed. Because of being that they've been washed and allowed to dry off, this also rushes the process of basically draining them of their juices.
Okay.
So one particular thing to do, try and get potatoes that are still nice and moist on the feel. They should actually be, by touching them, they should almost feel almost warm and moist.
Okay.
And even if you have them in a bag, when you open the bag, you should actually have a bit of moisture coming through.
Okay.
So they should almost be damp. They should never be dry like the way you'd smell a container with rice, for instance.
Okay.
So selecting your potatoes fresh will of course ensure that you always have the best potatoes.
Okay. Is that the same story with carrots as well? Like
same thing with carrots.
Make sure you pick the carrot.
Try and select carrots that have not of course been washed and stored for a very long period of time. Of course, also check the surface, make sure they're not also waxy.
Yes.
Because a waxy vegetable pretty much means it's basically missing a lot of juices inside it.
Okay.
And this, of course, means as soon as you chop them up, they also change color and they go very, very pale.
Okay.
So for those of you watching, my best recommendation as a chef to you all, select your vegetables from organic markets as opposed to supermarkets, and on many occasions, try and select the most rawest of vegetables as you can find.
Okay.
It, of course, will burn you a bit of time, especially if you're taking time in washing and cleaning them yourself.
Okay.
But if you're looking at keeping the quality 100%, just go for the.
So let me ask you, for those like people like me, I buy in bulk, my vegetables in bulk.
Okay.
So how best can I store potatoes so that I can increase the chances of them staying fresh longer? Yeah. So how best can I store my potatoes? Where? In what form should I store them?
So what I can recommend for your situation, for instance, let's say you bought 10 kilos of potatoes. You're not going to use all these potatoes in a span of 5 days.
Yeah.
I would say probably shop twice in that period.
Okay.
And another thing that I've also managed to do to secure a relationship with vendors, it also saves you the effort of having to buy twice.
Yeah.
So what happens is they can charge you for buying bulk, but you can actually pick them twice.
Okay.
So you can pick the first batch and maybe come back and pick the second batch. That way your price will not vary. The price difference will not be any different.
Okay.
But you'll of course have a fresher batch of potatoes in between the period that you needed the potatoes for.
Okay. And
you'll be able to finish the old potatoes before they've actually overstayed their period.
Yes, but in specific, actually, what I wanted was like this where do I store my potatoes? Once, like, let's say I have half a kg, but I need to use maybe quarter of that, and I need to use the other one maybe 2 days or 3 days after. So which is the best environment, or rather what container do I use to store so that at least I can reduce the chances of them losing the moisture, like you're saying?
So
do I put them in a bag, a brown bag, a plastic, or?
No, for potatoes, the best way and the most traditional way to store your potatoes, you can actually put a sack on the floor and just make sure your potatoes are evenly spread out. That way they can actually get a bit of air. So you just leave them
out in the air?
Yeah, leave them out in the air.
Okay.
But another thing as well, don't leave them somewhere that has very bright light,
okay,
because they will of course begin to grow.
Okay.
So keep them in a dark, cool area. And then, of course, also avoid keeping them in a bag, because that will also affect them and it will also rush the rotting process.
Okay.
So the best way to store your potatoes, buy them, spread them out on a flat surface, keep them away from light, but make sure that wherever you're keeping them is dark, and that the air is, of course, cool.
Yeah.
And another thing as well to pay attention to is keeping them in a warm place will, of course, also trigger the germination process.
Okay.
They'll actually begin to shoot. This is basically where you start seeing shoots popping from different angles.
Because the same thing happens with onions, by
the way.
Same thing happens
with onions.
It's because of the light and
it's basically one thing that you should avoid, especially with vegetables that you're keeping. Keep them away from moisture, keep them away from light.
Oh, okay.
So that is why we always recommend a cool, dry place. Yeah.
Okay.
So just stick with a cool, dry policy and you should be okay to keep your vegetables for the longest.
So no worrying about the type of potato you get. These
No. As I said, if you get your best potato quality, you should never have an issue getting your potatoes just the way you like them.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Perfect. I got it.
Perfect. Can we continue now?
Yes, we can continue.
All right.
We are off the potato issues now.
All right. So as we allow those to continue to cook, we'll of course proceed to prepare the rest of the ingredients.
Okay.
Now, as I mentioned, this is a very, very simple salad. So this of course entails for you to add everything into one bowl. So into this bowl, I would like you to begin by breaking the leaves of the mint from the stems, and you can just throw them in there. And while you do so, I'm also going to proceed to chop very thinly some spring onions.
Okay, now different would I say community or areas in the country have different type of spring onions.
Exactly.
So they all work anyway.
Exactly.
Okay. You just depending on where you are and the type of spring onion you have at that specific area, that will still work.
That will still work.
Oh, because we some of these recipes that you get and they say spring onion, and then you see maybe you have the privilege of seeing like a chef like yourself prepare. You get stuck in this. Do I have to have the exact, you're kind of lost in this thing.
You're lost in between trying to match the recipe.
Exactly.
Okay,
like to get the exact, exact ingredients without having the option of an alternative. You understand?
Exactly.
So some people, I think that's why for me, for a long time, I thought I perceived cooking quite a task and difficult, because there was always that I have to have the exact same thing that the chef had.
No, what
but
I would...
is it okay for you to just incorporate other things that are in the same?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question. I would always recommend use what's freshest and closest to you.
Okay.
It's always going to be an advantage to you because you can always be able to find it in season. But another thing that also limits us from being able to find the same ingredients every time is, of course, the timing.
Yeah.
So very important that I mention, on occasion, also take a walk through the market. Find out what comes in when, what is seasonal in which particular seasons. And it's the same policy we work with as chefs.
Yeah.
For instance, if I have a vegetable producer who produces me or supplies me with vegetables, what I do is I'll pretty much have him inform me about the season. So I'll pretty much know on this particular season there's a harvest of this, on this season we plant this. So what happens is you can actually be able to plan ahead, and you can be able to also have recipes in your mind set aside for that particular season, knowing that the ingredient that you're finding in season at that time will of course cost you cheapest during that season.
Okay.
Then again, there's still also the alternative of a lot of farms coming up that do a lot of greenhouse farming.
Okay.
Those will probably supply you with ingredients for most of the for most of the year, being that they of course set themselves to pretty much produce consistently from January to December. So then of course there's also that variance. There is of course ingredients that you may be able to find better quality if they're coming from greenhouses.
Yeah.
And there's the organic farmer who will of course go with the seasons.
Yeah.
So seasons is of course a very, very big factor to consider.
Okay.
So on most occasions, some of us will of course have a difficulty in finding an ingredient, and this is basically because we chose to look for it during the wrong season.
Okay.
And the wrong season would basically mean maybe looking for it before the harvest period or around its planting season.
Okay.
So basically by being able to forecast and look at what comes in or what is fresher on which months, it should actually make it so much easier. Yeah.
Okay, so even,
Yes.
so I've learned something actually. So in fact, if I want to cook a specific meal, given a specific ingredient, and then like if this ingredient is not available for this season, then that is something I have to put on the side and just wait.
Yeah, you can actually wait it out.
Okay.
So even for my, there's a frustration with you didn't find it, so you have to scrap everything.
Yes.
So the only best way to do so, just pay attention to your seasons and you should be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And chef, are these like these spring onions? These are easy things like in most of your recipes, because most of your recipes are very simple. And are these things that someone can just grow in their kitchen garden?
Actually, it's possible. For instance, even for some of you who are at home, take advantage of your home garden. If you don't have one, do what I do. Take time and walk out there, maybe on a weekend, buy some pot plants. You can even recycle containers. You can actually use any plastic container. Just grab some soil, get some seeds locally, and there's of course very, very many seeds available to us. Plant them from home. So remember, for some ingredients such as coriander, chives, these are ingredients that can grow even with the most limited space. So you can of course start your own home garden by planting some of the very basic ones and ones that actually harvest a little faster, and they also mature a little faster. And you'll of course also cut the cost of how much you're spending when you're buying your vegetables. So such ingredients as coriander, mint, rosemary, any particular herb that you can be able to think of, you can grow it in a pot plant. And you don't really need a big garden. You know, a container this size, you can actually grow quite a bit. Even for a container that size, you can actually be able to grow your own coriander at home.
And they pretty much grow by themselves.
And they grow, all you need to do is water. That's it. Because the idea behind such, for instance, for herbs, you know what happens is when you're harvesting, if you look at the vegetables that you buy in the market, they're actually uprooted from the soil with the roots on them. Now from home, all you need to do is grab a pair of scissors and slice just the bit that you need, which is of course the leafy part. And of course, once you slice that, this of course allows for more shoots to come up. So what happens is every time you cut, it's just going to keep regrowing. And because and of course you're not also chopping the same ingredient every single day. So that bit of variance between the use of these ingredients will of course give it time to also develop some time to grow.
Easy.
Very
this
easy,
is something you can actually do at home.
Exactly.
And the naming, I think one of these fine days we should have this introduction to all the families of onions. Yes.
I'll actually share that with my producer.
Yes. And actually, because some of these names, even for me, for a long time, I struggled with, you know.
As you said, also chives didn't make sense until you actually got the term and you understood what it is.
It's not so strange, you know. It's actually for people to know, when I see this in the market, it's actually this. When I see this in a recipe, it's actually this, and you actually are aware I can use this in the alternative. Because we
also another thing you can do, and for some of you home viewers that are watching, I of course, even during my period that I was training, all I needed to do was pretty much, and now you can even do it on your cell phone. You can actually download a picture of every ingredient, and when you walk around the market, all you need to do is go back to the photo and compare the image to the ingredient, and it makes it so much easier. Because then again, there's also instances where the person or the vendor dealing the vegetables to you may not also know the correct terminology for these ingredients, and some may only know them with the local term.
Name. Yes, exactly.
So the best way to do it, download, there's so many images online, just download a few and keep them on your phone. Take a day that you're not actually going to market to shop. Just go there and just be very observant. Just walk around and find what's available in that area. You'll actually be able to get so much more available to you.
And then, you know, at least like in our Kenyan community, we have a lot of like different vegetables that we grow. And there is like the farmers are also doing grafting vegetables together. So sometimes you're dealing with maybe coriander, but it looks a bit different. But it's the same thing.
Exactly.
Lesson on vegetables.
Lesson learned, yeah. Right, now as we continue, I'll of course ask you to check if our potatoes are cooked through.
Okay, so if this goes right through, it's cooked.
Exactly. If
not,
you struggle to go through, definitely needs a bit more cooking time.
Now it needs more cooking time because it's
still hard.
It's still hard.
Perfect. Yes. So which of course gives us just enough time to finish making our dressing for the salad. So now into the bowl with the mint and the spring onions, you're going to also add your chopped up white onions. Also a very, very good variation from the red onions in that it's also not very, very pungent and it also goes very, very well in its raw state mixed into a salad. Okay. Right? So next up, we're going to add some mayonnaise. So I'm going to hand you those two.
So what type of mayonnaise is this? Is it
This
plain?
Is just store-bought mayonnaise. This is it's basically the original mayonnaise. This is store-bought mayonnaise, which of course contains egg.
Okay, and what is the difference between these and the eggless?
Now with an eggless mayonnaise, you will find that there's different ingredients that they use. Okay. You can of course find different techniques using, or different recipes using such ingredients as egg beaters. Okay. This is basically powdered egg. Okay. You can of course be able to also substitute using mayonnaise by making a dressing. For instance, you can also make a dressing maybe by using some plain yogurt.
Okay, yes, I wanted to ask about the yogurt.
Yeah, plain yogurt also works very, very nicely. So for some of you who are also looking at options of cutting out the egg from a dressing, you can actually work with plain mayonnaise and it will do just fine. Okay. Yeah.
So there's many types when in the supermarkets or in the marketplace. There's so many mayonnaises. Now there's the tangy, there's the plain mayonnaise, there's the one that is a bit they call it what, like, is it like it has like a salt kind of like taste?
Exactly.
I forget the name, but there's still another one. There's so many types.
So many varieties, yeah.
So I'm wondering when it comes to dressing, like for instance, this is just plain
mayonnaise.
It means it doesn't have a taste to it. When you taste it with your mouth, does it have any taste?
Yeah, it's just got the mayonnaise taste, which of course you do get the characteristics of a bit of egg, a bit of mustard, and of course a bit of some vinegar.
Oh, okay. And so is this the best to use with salads always? The one that doesn't have a taste? Or
as I mentioned, different salads call for different dressings. Okay. And of course, different dietary requirements also call for different ingredients. So for instance, you may want to make the same salad for someone who's got egg allergy. Yes. So you can of course use yogurt and they'll probably be very okay with it. Okay. And it may not even really vary in flavor. You can of course maybe look at the ingredients that go into a mayonnaise, incorporate them individually into the dish, but avoid the eggs and you'll still get the same result. Okay. Right, so to that we're going to add a bit of chives. We're also going to be squeezing into that the juice of half a lemon. So this is basically to activate the flavors. Okay. And it also keeps your salad nice and fresh.
So would you say that from your experience is like a lemon and a must, a mandatory?
Well, I would say an acid is a good catalyst in a salad for the fact that it also helps to cut out the richness of the salad. Okay. So if you can, of course, avoid, if you're not a big fan of vinegar, lemon is, of course, the best option. But you will realize that most recipes may actually require the use of vinegar. So if you're, of course, not a fan of vinegar, just go with plain old lemons. Okay. You should be very okay.
I've noticed you've put spring onions, you've put chives, you've put white onions. That is one family. That is onions.
That is all onions.
That is all onions, but different
all having different textures, flavors, and aromas.
So you can put it. Okay.
You can, of course, use even more than one onion in a dish.
Okay.
So as I said, depending on how creative you're feeling, you feel how creative you feel with your recipe, and the options are endless.
And for the salad, which onions mainly play a role? Like often
I would say salads? Probably a lot of leeks are used in salads. A lot of spring onions, a lot of chives, and once in a while you will of course also find red onions, but of course with the red onions you do have to go through the process of soaking them in a bit of some salt water just to get rid of the pungency.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
So the only reason why most chefs or most cooks will avoid the use of red onion is basically because of the sharpness of its flavor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now there is of course also an ingredient that I had not mentioned as we began. Very important that I pull this out. Now these are basically hard-boiled eggs.
Okay.
And what I like to do is I like to throw them in the freezer.
Why?
Once they're boiled. The reason for this is it actually allows for very, very good texture when you begin to grate them.
Oh.
So what happens is as soon as you boil them and cool them off, you can throw them in your fridge or freezer for about 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
And what happens is it actually makes it so much simpler to grate. It doesn't actually mash. So you'll actually, these are actually,
egg.
no. It's actually a hard-boiled egg.
Yeah.
It's just that it's cold.
It's very, very
but
cold.
it's a hard-boiled egg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these were pre-cooked, and then I threw them in just before we began, just to make sure that once we begin to grate, they're not actually going to mash into your fingers. They're actually just going to go through your grater. Exactly. It actually just grates very simply.
Okay.
So we're of course going to be adding this a little later. I will of course allow this to sit undisturbed at the back here. And this is one particular ingredient that I like to incorporate into the salad a little later once the potatoes come in. Okay. Because the heat of the potatoes combined with the hard-boiled egg also brings a very, very rich, creamy aroma, which you'll be able to see as we go.
Okay. I've seen we've mixed the mint here. The mint. What's the advantage of having the mint in?
Now, the mint, for one particular reason, it's also a very, very good and handy ingredient. It also cuts the richness of the egg from the mayonnaise. Okay. And as most people try and avoid the aroma or the smell of dressings and stuff like that, ingredients such as mint leaves will actually be able to cleanse your palate very, very nicely. Okay. And combined with the lemon juice, it can actually also aid in making sure that your salad can actually stay for longer. So if you are going, it's also a preservative. So if you are going to, of course, store this maybe to serve or to have, if you're making a salad maybe on a Monday to consume maybe between Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, with the addition of a bit of lemon juice, you actually extend the shelf life just by a bit. As opposed to not using it, it'll only last maybe for one night. Okay. Yes. So this basically does the two things. It also aids in making sure that it's more of a preservative and a sterilizer to your salad. Okay. Make sure that you'll not also be able to get any foreign aromas coming into your salad if you keep it in the fridge. Okay. And the potato salad will actually hold its flavor right through the storage process. Oh,
so you can incorporate the mint leaves in where you have like a dressing, for instance, let's say egg mayonnaise that have like that egg smell or like a funny aftertaste. So you can put in the lemon juice.
You can use a bit of lemon juice and mint.
So that they can just take care of that. Yeah,
so basically this, for one, it'll of course also fight that very, very strong aroma from your mayonnaise. Yeah. And as I mentioned, it also gives a very, very beautiful richness to your salad. So this on serving, even when you serve it warm and it doesn't, maybe it sat out of the refrigerator and you served it a little warmer, maybe at room temperature. Yeah. The mint will actually give a very refreshing aroma to the salad, even just on serving. Because what happens is the mint and the lemon juice keeps the ingredients so alive in there that as soon as the salad is served to you, it actually smells like it doesn't have an aroma. You can't really smell the mayonnaise, you can't smell the lemon juice. It balances the flavors. Okay. Yes.
All right. So, and talking of cold and warm, some salads need to be served cold and some warm.
No. Salads are stored. Now, this is, and for viewers at home, this is something most of us get wrong. Salads should be stored cold, but they should be served at room temperature. So what happens is for most salads, the best way or the recommended way to do it is take your salad out in advance. Okay. Allow it to come to room temperature and then proceed to serve. And then serve it. Because another thing is if your salad is too cold, it's also not very easy to enjoy because you're really trying to fight the flavors. Yes. And you can't, and it actually, by having anything cold, it actually blends the flavors. Yeah. And most of us know the only best ingredients that are served cold are sweet. Yes. Because the temperature doesn't really affect sugars. But for ingredients such as salads, for dishes such as salads, I always recommend store it cold, but serve it at room temperature. So this means basically take it out of the fridge in advance. Okay. Allow it to come to room temperature. This is basically more reducing the coldness of the dish. And you can also be able to do so by transferring it into a separate container or serve it on a warm plate, and it also gets rid of that coldness of your salad.
Okay.
So that's a very, very important tip. So don't be tempted, or don't even try and serve your salad cold, because you will not actually enjoy it.
Okay.
And you see, when something is extremely cold, you'll also have a very, very difficult time chewing it and of course digesting it, because having it cold will of course mean that your body will of course take quite a bit of time to bring it to room temperature and of course break down the components of your dish.
Okay, this is very green.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting to think it's all onions. Okay.
Right, so to that, very important to season with some salt.
Salt, yes. At what point do you salt your salad? Because for me, like I was telling you, there's a mayonnaise that is actually salty. I don't know whether I'm wrong when I say this.
No, it actually does happen that you can, of course, over-season a mayonnaise.
Okay.
And you can also under-season a mayonnaise. So on occasion, you may find if a mayonnaise is very salty, it basically means they added too much salt to it.
So you don't need to add salt.
So you don't need to add salt into your salad.
But when on a normal, like when you're preparing salad, whether mayonnaise is present or not present, at what point do you salt it?
Always
again,
at the end.
Again, remember we have this thing for your salt needs to be cooked, you know, or you know, you need to have, I don't know how you'll incorporate the salt so that you don't have the salt raw, because they say it's not healthy to have the salt just when it's not cooked, right? So I don't know, do we use a specific type of salt when we're using salads in specific?
Well, I would recommend, if you can of course be able to find sea salt, it's a very, very good alternative to using regular iodized salt.
Okay, when it comes to salad.
When it comes to salads.
Exactly. Okay, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So at what point do you actually season now when you're doing your salad?
For instance, this being that this is going to be our dressing, very important that I actually season it very lightly at this stage, just to make sure that I have some salt in there.
Okay.
And remember, due to the fact that we also added a bit of salt to the water in the potatoes, very important to also make sure that the two salts don't overpower each other.
Okay.
So you can do it two ways. If you're of course not a fan of using salt in its raw form, you can of course maybe season your water, make sure it's very salty water when you boil your potatoes, and that way your potatoes will actually be salted enough. Or you can actually serve the salt on the side, and the diners that you're going to be serving the meal to, of course, also have the option to add salt or consume it without.
Okay.
But of course, the addition of salt is very, very important in that it actually aids in making sure that you can be able to get the best out of your ingredients. Okay. What happens is, if you get a meal without salt, it really doesn't, you can never get to the end of this dish if it's of course under-salted or it has no salt at all. So the idea is to just salt enough for you to be able to tell it's there, but not to tell that it is an ingredient that is dominating the flavors of your dish.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, so as we finish off our dressing, we are of course going to check on our potatoes once more.
Yeah.
And as we do so, I'm also going to proceed to chop up some of my green apple. So this you can of course alternatively proceed to peel, but I very much like a bit of skin from the apple in there. It also carries a very, very beautiful juice to it. So you can of course proceed to peel your apples before adding into your mixture, or you can actually work without.
They are remaining like 5 minutes.
About 5 minutes,
about
perfect.
5 minutes. So red apple will work?
Red apple is a little sweeter.
Okay.
And I find that it doesn't really blend well with mayonnaise.
Okay.
So I would recommend, if you're going to use an apple, you can proceed to use the green variety. And also a very beautiful addition I found to adding to a potato salad is a bit of some green grapes. If you can find the nice big green grapes, they're also very, very good in salads.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Now just to finish off chopping our apples, be sure to of course add this into your mixture. At this point, this will of course give it just enough time to combine flavors before you proceed to add the last and final ingredient, which is your potatoes. And of course, once that's done, all you're left to do is proceed to allow your potatoes to cook till fully, just about till they're fully cooked. And what we're going to do is we're going to take them out, we're going to drain them and cool them off in some cold running water, and then we'll of course proceed to cut them up and incorporate that into your salad, being the last and final ingredient. But before we get there, we'll of course give you this chance to take a break. But when we do come back, do stay tuned. We are going to take you through the last and final process of finishing this beautiful salad. And I'm also going to be showing you some very simple plating techniques. And last but not least, share some beautiful serving suggestions. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. By cooling them down also avoids for you to get any particular mushy consistency from your egg.
Okay, so if I didn't want, if like for instance, a person who does not eat eggs, what would they incorporate at this juncture?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are just tuning in, you've probably missed out on a lot that we've done today, but do remember you can recap on this and many other episodes through our YouTube channel. That's BrandPlus TV Kenya. So do make a point of subscribing today. Now, of course, to finish off this simple dish, we of course have most of the ingredients in here, but we are now going to proceed to add the last and final ones. So I'm going to ask you to just throw the potatoes in there. Just throw them in here.
As they are whole?
As they are, yeah.
Okay.
Now, something also to mention, potato salad is of course renowned for being a very, very chunky kind of a salad. So we pretty much don't need to chop up the potatoes. If you of course have them a little crushed after boiling, it's very okay. Just proceed to cool them off and then just mix them into the salad, which I will allow you to do.
All right.
And of course, very, very importantly, as I mentioned, a very, very key ingredient that we may have missed out on introducing for those of you who are with us right from the start. Hard-boiled eggs are a very, very crucial addition and a very traditional addition to a potato salad. They also add to a very, very beautiful richness and creaminess of the dish. And it also just complements the meal in general, making sure that you, of course, have a beautiful balance of a bit of protein from the egg, a bit of carbs from the potatoes, and of course loads of other vitamins and minerals that you can also derive from the apples, the fresh mint, and of course the onions. Right, perfect. That's nicely mixed through. Okay. So all that's left to do is basically grate in about 2 hard-boiled eggs. Okay. So as we mentioned earlier, it grates very, 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 very nicely. Yeah. By cooling them down also avoids for you to get any particular mushy consistency from your egg.
Okay, so if I didn't want, if like for instance, a person who does not eat eggs, what would they incorporate at this juncture?
Well, I would say you can actually omit the egg completely and you'll still have a meal on its own. Okay. Of course, you can also maybe serve this maybe with a side of some meat, which will of course be a replacement of the protein from the egg. Okay. So the egg is basically just a complementary ingredient that ensures that you do have a very, very balanced kind of a dish. Okay. And as we said, if you can of course be able to encompass the addition of proteins, carbs.
So can you boil chicken and then slice it?
Yes, yes, you can actually steam some chicken and shred it in there. Okay. You can of course also maybe even some fish, of course, as you mentioned a bit in an episode before. Yeah. You mentioned the addition of some tuna. Yes. You can of course also just break up some pieces of some tinned tuna into that. Okay. And it will of course give it also a very, very beautiful flavor. Okay. All in all. Okay. Okay. Right. So I'm going to now proceed to begin plating. I'm just going to run a cloth through your end there. Yes. So as I mentioned, very, very simple salad. the only particular allergens that you can be sure to encompass, especially when serving this to people who may not know what's in it, be sure to also mention the mayonnaise that's in there. And as you can see, with the mayonnaise in there plus the hard-boiled eggs, it is quite rich in protein. And of course, the carbs are quite high.
Yes, I noted we didn't use olive oil.
And there's no olive oil anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, so very, very simply, I'm going to proceed to just shred up a bit of some soft leaf lettuce onto the plate. This, of course, is basically just to give a bed for your salad. It also gives a bit of a texture to chew on, especially with the richness of the egg and the potatoes.
Yeah.
The lettuce actually breaks the monotony of just one particular crunchy or one particular texture, and it also adds to a bit of a crunch.
Okay. So what can you use in the alternative of a lettuce?
You can actually serve it with any particular salad of choice.
Okay.
I wouldn't actually recommend any steamed vegetables because it may, of course, collide with the two textures, being that you're serving a cold dish, pairing it with a hot dish.
Yeah.
So the lettuce is actually something that I would just use to break the consistency. You can, of course, maybe even chop up some raw cabbage, maybe red or purple cabbage.
Okay.
Sorry, purple cabbage or some yellow cabbage. And it's also going to give a nice, beautiful, refreshing crunch to it. You can also add maybe some grated carrots, also a very, very good way to break the texture of the potatoes and of course the richness of the egg.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right, so very, very simply, once done, proceed to move your chunks of your potato salad onto your plate.
It's very green.
It's very, very green.
So can you put a slice of tomato just to give it color?
Yes, you can add any particular ingredient to your to a salad that you like. As I said, a lot of the dishes we recreate on the show are basically just to give the viewers an idea of how it's made. But this, of course, doesn't limit you from adding anything. If, for instance, if you want to put a nice chunk of steak next to the salad, it's very allowed.
Okay.
Remember, at the end of the day, we're basically sharing some small tips of making different alternatives, but whatever actually works for you at home, if you prefer eating your salad warmed up in the microwave, it's totally up to you. As we always say in the food world, the guest is always right. So which means in this case, the diner is always right. If they prefer ketchup on top of all this, you definitely can't limit them to it because it's something that they already love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, and now just to finish that off, be sure to also incorporate a bit of your chopped up apples onto your plate. And you can be sure to also correct the seasoning before you're done plating all this. But of course, very, very importantly, before you add any particular seasoning, it's always professional to at least taste a bit of the mixture, which will do for us.
Oh, wow. I taste the mayo, I taste the coriander, I can taste the potato, I can taste a bit of the crunchiness of the apple. It's really nice.
So you can actually now see that you can't really
the
pick out
as well.
And the onions as well, but they're not as pungent as they should be. They actually mellow down from the lemon juice.
Yes.
There we go. And now, of course, just to finish that off, you can just crush over some black peppercorns. And a very, very good alternative I like to serve with a salad, a bit of some bread on the side is always a good alternative to go with. It also makes it very, very nice and easy to be able to break the richness. And of course, if you're looking at also maybe incorporating maybe some toasted croutons to that, it can also work just the same.
Okay.
Right, so viewers, we are of course very sad to say it, but we have come to the last and final part of the show. I do thank you very, very much for tuning in this far. If you've of course been able to capture the whole of today's events, you can actually be able to maybe schedule or add to your schedule this weekend, and you can actually try out the potato salad. Do take a chance. You never know, it could actually be that missing dish on your ingredients or your menu list at home that has actually been missing. And of course, very important to mention, you can of course also be able to use different varieties of potatoes for the salad, Of course, being very vigilant to remember that some potatoes do, of course, come sweet and some will, of course, be savory.
Yes.
Do, of course, be sure to maybe also do a bit of research before trying it out. There's, of course, recipes that are posted every other day. And another thing that I've also realized is there's not really an end to trying out new things. Yes. So please, for those of you who are, of course, maybe a bit too worried about trying this at home, remember, you can never, of course, perfect the art of cooking without actually trying it out on your own. So I think we can wrap up the show now.
Yes.
And will you do us the honor?
Yes, and for you to be part of this show like I am, you just need to text your name on the number on the screen and a short description of who you are and a possible meal that you would like to learn how to cook. And you will be called to the show like I was. This has been fun, Chef.
Thank you very much.
I have learned so much.
Thank you, thank you.
You do make cooking look very easy. It's simply a walkthrough. I've enjoyed myself so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And for those of you at home, we also thank you for tuning in with us and being very, very supportive right through. But I will also remind you, you can be able to share your comments, suggestions, or queries, or even compliments to us. You can be able to do so by writing to us through our Facebook page, that's BrandPlus TV Kenya. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, then you definitely have been missing a lot. So until the next episode, do stay blessed and see you soon.
Bye-bye.